Oh, that's great.
Great to see some familiar names here. Yay.
Oh, that's great. So I think we're going to get going because we do have a big group and a lot to cover. I want to introduce you guys. First of all, welcome to the Lunch with NEMA in May. It's a beautiful summer-like day out there. Wishing for a little AC at the moment. So welcome everybody. And today's session, just to let you know, is being recorded and will be available on the NEMA website later on, just in case you have to leave a little bit early, or you want to share with your colleagues and stuff like that, or you want to come back and actually listen again to Carole Ann, because we've heard rave reviews from our conferences. We've had multiple fellows, NEMA fellows, actually write about her session and stuff like that. And I know one of my colleagues came back from the conference all revved up after attending one of her sessions. So I want to welcome Carole Ann Penney from Penney Leadership. And for today's webinar is on how to leverage your network even now to support your career success. So Penny, Carole Ann, I'm going to leave it up to you to continue the conversation now.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Heather. It's so great to be here and great to see all of you. I see some familiar names in the chat and some familiar locations. I'm also in Rhode Island in Smithfield, and so I see a lot of Rhode Islanders here, including, I have to shout out to Kathy Saunders, who is my first boss ever in a museum and my first job ever, who taught me many things that I have learned about facilitation and the museum world. And so even though I now work as a career coach and in leadership development, museums really feel like my roots, and you all are my people. So I especially love coming to the NEMA conference and getting to see you all today. So today we're going to talk about networking, which everybody loves, right? It's everybody's favorite thing to do, especially now that we're all separated. I am totally being sarcastic because I'm sure that many of you are here because networking is awkward and feels like a chore. And so hopefully we're going to come out of this feeling a little less overwhelmed and feel like we have some strategies and an understanding of how to approach it. So first I want to introduce myself. As Heather said, I'm Carole Ann, and I'm here to help you navigate your work with purpose and resilience. And so what that means is that you're approaching what you do with intention and adaptability. And that's something that I feel is so important in regular times, but especially in this current moment when so many things feel outside of our control. I've been doing this for 8 years as a professional coach, certified professional coach, and I work mainly in career and leadership development. I've probably had more clients in the museum industry than any other industry, but I work across all different industries with mission-driven leaders, whether they're in nonprofits, education, insurance, engineering, all over the map. What I love to do is to kind of consider myself a travel agent for career navigation, and I love to bring practical tools that will help you do your best work. So what I'm hoping is that you walk away from today with real actionable information that you can put into practice right away. So to get started, I'd love to hear from you in the chat box. What are some things that you don't like about networking? What are the things that stop you from doing it? They might be mindsets, they might be logistical things. Go ahead and pop in there and just type out what comes to mind that stops you from networking. Make sure that you're going to all panelists and attendees so everybody can see what you're writing. Awkward introduction, says Janet. Yes, networking can be super awkward. Julia agrees. Keep them coming. What else besides awkwardness? Have no existing contacts, so you feel like you're starting from zero. It's hard to know what to say about myself. That's a big one. It's like when somebody is introducing yourself, all you're thinking about is like, introducing themselves to you, all you're thinking about is what you're going to say about yourself, and you don't even catch their name. Not being sure if I'm imposing on someone. I don't know what to ask. I don't want to be self-promotional. Don't want to seem desperate, like I want something. It feels inorganic. I know it's meant to be reciprocal, but also often I don't know what I have to offer. And it's hard for it to not feel transactional. Keeping your network going, especially now, that's pretty complicated. I've hardly been out of my house for the past 3 months. So fear of being new to the field and not knowing everything there is to know. Yeah, maybe it will show that you don't know something. It might be embarrassing. I'm not good at talking about myself, although I'm interested in hearing about other people. It's uncomfortable to reach out when you haven't seen or heard from someone in a while. Time commitments, small talk. Yeah, so I think this is great. You've got a lot of the things that I hear often. Hard to not feel like a telemarketer. Yeah. I've also heard that it can feel like you're cheating, like you're using privilege. Like if you're using your network to get something done or to get a job, that you're like taking the shortcut and you want to do it on your own merit. That's something I've heard a lot. Or that it's a weakness to ask for help. Great. So with all these things that are very uncomfortable about it, why do we do it? Type into the chat now, why do you think it's valuable to grow your network? Go ahead and tell me why bother if it's so uncomfortable, awkward, hard to talk about yourself. You may be able to help them too. Foster new relationships and potential collaborations. Make connections and build future partnerships. Yeah, so connecting, building partnerships. Sometimes Emily says she surprises herself and she actually has fun meeting new people. That's totally happened to me too. It's expected, says Teddy. You have to do it. It's like eating your vegetables, right? Try to connect with people in different places, to learn from their experience and share mine. Potential for opportunities. Dan says, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Yes, I hear that a lot, and it's true, but there's often people have some negative connotations with that. Wanting to transition to another institution when everyone knows everyone in the field you work in. Learning what's going on, keeping your finger on the pulse of things, hearing innovative ideas, match up skills with those who need them. Great. You never know what interesting or new ideas you'll come away with. All right, so there are some good things about it, right? It connects you with other people who might have innovative ideas. They might have a sense of the trends going on. They might have technical expertise or skills to share. They might help you partner and get things done. And so there's a lot to gain by connecting with others. Of course, the landscapers have arrived at my house right now. So if you hear the blaring leaf blowers, that's what's happening in the background. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's talk about some new ways of wrapping our heads around networking so that we can really maximize all this good stuff about it and minimize the awkwardness or the things that we don't want. Yes, Matt, I agree. We have Zoom radar. Okay, so the first idea that I want to share with you is that networking is not about shortcuts, cheating, playing a game, being political, shameless self-promotion, being fakey. We need to change the way that we're thinking about it. Networking is about people as resources for information and connections. Last fall, I was at a networking event with some college students, and one of the students that I met, we started talking about networking, and she was saying how hesitant she is to do it. And she said, I really want to show that I can do this on my own. And I asked her, would you write a paper without consulting any sources? And she said, no, I would never do that. And so we need to think about networking as just part of doing good research. So it's about being resourceful and tapping what's going on all around us. And we're lucky right now because networking is more accessible, and I think it's less awkward than it ever has been before. It's not just those cheesy after work events where people are like wearing suits and carrying around a handful of their business cards and shoving them into people's hands. It's about authentic connections. And there are so many ways to do that now. There are conferences and workshops. There are specific affinity groups online or in person that you can connect with. And even social media gives us this opportunity to connect directly with people that we never would have connected with before. So for instance, I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts, which is Dear HBR, a work advice show from Harvard Business Review. And the guest expert was a woman who's the chief people officer at HubSpot in Boston. And I was so impressed with how she shared her knowledge in this interview. I went and I looked her up on LinkedIn, and I sent her a direct message and just told her how much I appreciated the podcast and what I took away from it. And she wrote back to me. So, there are these ways to connect with people that we never would have had access to before. And so I'm curious for you guys, what are some examples of ways that you are connecting with groups of people, especially right now during this quarantine time? I know there are affinity groups within NEMA. Are there groups that you're a part of on LinkedIn? Where do you go to connect with other people? Go ahead and type them in the chat box. Teams. Julia, what do you mean by teams? Is that like your team at work, or is that a platform that I don't know about? Microsoft Teams. Got it. Yeah.
And I will mention, thanks for mentioning the NEMA one, because we do have quite a few networking opportunities and stuff like that if you check out our website and stuff. So
yeah, I know that there's a Gen X group that my friend is a part of there. There's a Young Professionals Association in Boston, Encore Boston Networking Sessions, Coffee Hours, ACM. Oh yeah, I'm sure ACM has a ton of groups. Following people on LinkedIn. Yeah, Sandra, I do that too. I don't know if everybody knows that, but you can, in addition to just connecting with someone, you can follow people. So for example, Adam Grant, who is the host of a podcast called Work Life. He's an organizational psychologist. I follow him on LinkedIn. I don't know him, so if I tried to connect with him, I'm sure he wouldn't connect with me, but I can follow him and see all of his content that he puts up there. And so it's a way of me kind of tapping into what he's thinking about as a thought leader. Yay, I love him too, Sandra. Getting to events is a big barrier. And so, yeah, hoping that networking continues to be offered online. I think in some way, shape, or form it will, Allie, because it's going to have to be, but also it's very convenient. I'm part of a group here in Rhode Island called Women in Leadership Nexus. It's a membership group for women who are interested in learning and developing as leaders. And so that has been a great space for me because it's a really supportive environment. It's very warm when you walk in for the first time. I'm an introvert. I'm sure many of you are. And oftentimes introverts feel like we can't network in the way that extroverts do, but it's just not true. Everyone comes to a networking event with the same reason, which is that they want to connect with other people. And so chances are they all feel as awkward as you do. And so I've just kind of challenged myself to build that muscle. And when I go to a networking event, I'll just walk up to someone and I'll stick out my hand and I'll say, "Hi, I'm Carole Ann." And 9 times out of 10, or maybe 10 times out of 10, the person is just super relieved that someone has come over to talk with them. And so I've just practiced that over and over. Also at conferences, well, who knows if this will be the case anymore. You know how when you go into a conference session and you're waiting for it to start, people sit in different rows, and while they're waiting, they take out their phone and they're looking at their phone. Well, that's great networking time. So oftentimes when I come into a conference session, I'll actually sit next to someone I don't know and I'll say hi, and they'll put down their phone and then we'll start talking. And that's because it was very uncomfortable in the beginning, but then I just built that muscle, and there are a lot of things that have come out of that have used that time really well for me. All right, so let's talk about what your network is made up of. So we have different kinds of connections that we want to be thinking about in our network. And these are some of the main ones that I thought of. And there are probably some different ones that you can think of that you'd want to add here. But first I want to think about connecting with your peers. So what I mean by peers is your colleagues, both internal to your organization and external. So connecting with your peers in your organization means that you can understand them better so you can collaborate more effectively. If you know what their skills are, you know how you can draw on their expertise and leverage their strengths. You can connect with them so that you're informed about what's going on. And if you understand the goals of people in different departments and at different levels of your organization, you're going to be even more effective at your job because you're going to be a more effective collaborator. Now, some may dismiss that and think of it as plain politics, but politics are part of the workplace. You're always going to be in a place where there are different departments with different goals, trying to, for lack of a better word, compete for resources. And so, it's not necessarily being political. It's about understanding the landscape of where you work and being informed about how to navigate that strategically. And so that's within your organization. There's also a great advantage to being connected to peers and colleagues external to your organization. So when I was working at the Rhode Island Council for the Humanities, I was the director of operations there. So I did a lot of things like HR and financial reporting. And often there were things that came up where we needed a new tool, or we needed a new form or a policy. And so I had 2 resources who were directors of operations from my network at external organizations. And I can't tell you how many times I called them up and said, "Hey, do you have a policy about this that I could take a look at? Or what do you do when this comes up?" And it turned out that I didn't have to reinvent the wheel and create a whole new form, but I could just sort of leverage the work that they've done. We could compare notes and strengthen our policies together, especially in nonprofits where there's so much to do and there's so much great knowledge out there. To collaborate with external colleagues is something that helps us to leverage our resources, to learn from each other, to be connected. There's so many great things that come out of it. Another type of a connection is a mentor. Now, this is probably something that we've all heard of. A mentor is somebody who can offer you advice based on their experience and their perspective. So oftentimes mentors are people who have walked ahead of you, and they can say, I've been there, I've done that, here's how I did it, here's what you should do too. So mentors can offer you perspective, and they can help you to skill up. Now, sponsors are something slightly different, and you may not have heard as much about a sponsor versus a mentor. If mentors offer perspective and help you skill up, sponsors offer opportunities and help you to move up. So a sponsor is someone who will use their political capital to advocate for your career development. Unlike a mentor, so a mentor might be somebody who takes you under their wing, or you might ask them to be your mentor. A sponsor is usually someone who chooses you, who decides to take you under their wing and help you along. So when my brother was in college, he had an internship at UBS Financial Services, and his supervisor for this internship was named Bart. And after my brother graduated, Bart moved to, John worked for Bart. He got the job at UBS. And then Bart moved to New York City and worked for a different firm. And he took John with him. And then Bart moved to another firm and he took John with him. And so Bart was really my brother's sponsor, who was looking out for him, developing his career and helping him move up. And there came a day when they parted ways, but I think Bart will always be kind of a mentor to him. But perhaps you can think of somebody who has sponsored you in your career, who advocated for you for a promotion or helped you along the way. I certainly would call Kathy a mentor and a sponsor for me as I was starting out in the museum field. And then separate from that is a coach. So sometimes a coach can be conflated with a mentor, but they're actually two very different things. And as a coach, I love a chance to tell you how that's different. So a coach is somebody who is objective, an outsider. They're not there to tell you what to do. They're there to be a sounding board, and their expertise is to bring tools and questions that help you to develop skills, develop goals, develop your way forward. So a mentor might be somebody within your organization who has some real skin in the game and, has some hopes and dreams for you. A coach is completely objective. It's about figuring out your hopes and dreams for yourself. So then there's another type of connection that I want us all to think about together, which is your personal board of directors. Oh yes, Scarlett, thanks for posting. HBR's Women at Work podcast had an episode on sponsorship last fall. It's a great podcast and definitely worth a listen to learn more about sponsors. I'm also going to send out notes from this session and a handout for you, which includes an article about the difference between mentoring and sponsorship and how you can set yourself up to really be open and available to be sponsored. So your personal board of directors. So we all work for organizations that have boards of directors, right? And their role is to set the strategy of the organization, to ensure alignment, to advise, to govern, at least ideally. They often meddle in different things too. But this is a concept that we can also adapt to ourselves as individuals. And oftentimes when people think about networking, it's this big, overwhelming concept that seems really hard to approach. And so I like this idea of a personal board of directors because it brings in this closer circle. And for me, it definitely makes it easier to approach and think about who's in my network. So this group of people is a trusted inner circle of advisors that you call on. I turn to them when I'm facing a decision, when I need to find my way, when I need some perspective. And they have been really key to developing my career and leadership. Now, people who are on your board of directors, They don't necessarily need to know that they're a board member. You don't have to formally ask people to be your board member. You also don't have to formally ask people to be your mentor. You can, but you can also just hold this concept in your own mind for yourself. But they can be there to help you consider factors that you hadn't, learn things the easy way. So if they share from their mistakes, maybe you can navigate things a little more smoothly. They can open doors by making connections for you. And they can also reflect back to you who you are and what you bring to the table. So they can kind of see your skills and name them for you. I know with Kathy, one of the things that she did when she was my supervisor is she pointed out to me that managing up was a skill that I had. I didn't even know what managing up was. I didn't know it was a thing, but she named it for me and helped me to kind of wrap my head around that and use it as a tool. I had another member of my board of directors who, I'm a person who thinks about all different departments in an organization. And so I was really beating myself up because I couldn't choose, like, I want to go into programming, or I want to go into development, or finance. And she came in and she looked at me and she said, you know what you are? You're a systems thinker. You're someone who thinks about how all the pieces come together. And that changed so much for me because I went from feeling like I was doing everything wrong and I couldn't pick a focus to understanding that I actually had this unique superpower that looked at the organization differently. And so having these people who can kind of reflect those things back to you can help you understand yourself and talk about yourself more clearly. So a couple of questions came in here. Aaron asks, are the people on our board of directors also usually mentors or sponsors? Sure. Yeah. I would, if somebody is a mentor to you or a sponsor to you, I would consider them a member of your board of directors. So there's someone that you would go to for advice, for guidance, to ask questions. It's they're not mutually exclusive with the people in these other types of connections. There could be overlap there. It could also include colleagues, for sure. There at one of the organizations I was at, there was definitely a woman who I looked to as a member of my board who was a colleague, a coworker there. Can family members be on the personal board of directors? So Yara, that is it's a really good question. Family members can be tough. They have a lot of skin in the game. They have a lot of opinions about where they want to see you go or what they think you're capable of. So you have to use your judgment when it comes to that. So I would say, like, my husband is definitely not on my personal board of directors because he's way too close to the situation and he has just too much skin in the game. But my sister-in-law is someone who I call to talk about leadership issues, navigating our careers as women. And so I would consider her a member of my board of directors. So when it comes to family, just think about how helpful someone can be, or how much objective perspective versus how much of their own agenda they bring to the conversations. So that brings up a question about how to determine who the right people are to connect with and to bring into your board of directors. And just like an organization's board of directors, you want people with a variety of skills and backgrounds. So you want it to be kind of a rounded out group of people who are going to give you a full picture or different perspectives on what your decision is, or how you can think about it. Another thing to ask yourself is, are they believable? So for an example, I had a client who she was asking herself, Well, I'm thinking about going back to school to get an MBA, and my mom has a lot of opinions about it. But she never got an MBA. She doesn't know about advanced degrees. So she's not the best person to be advising me on this. And so for the questions that you're asking, you want to make sure that you're asking people who are believable, meaning they have some sort of perspective or expertise, or they know about that thing, and they're not just spouting opinions about it. And another thing is to look for people who are connectors. So you probably know somebody in your life who you just can't leave a conversation with them without them saying, oh, I want you to meet so-and-so, or have you heard about this podcast? Or I just read this book, I think you'd really love it. Those are the people who are always matching people together. They can be hubs of a lot of different connections. And so they are fantastic to have on your board or in your circle, because they can connect you to a lot of different people and resources. Let's see, what else did I want to say about that? I want to ask you right now to just, as you're sitting here, grab a piece of paper and write down 5 people that you would consult on a major decision. So say it was about, relocating for a job, or whether you want to go for throw your hat in the ring for a director level position or something like that. Who are 5 people in your life that you would consult on that decision?
Carole Ann, we did have a question come in through the chat that might be,
Sure.
through the Q&A that might be able to be answered later or now. Can you recommend an affinity group for midlife career changers? It seems as if most professional development in museums are for young people or seasoned professionals. That mid-career is always, I think, the hardest transition right there.
I love to work with people who are in that mid-career transition. It's really common that people they have their early career experience. They either follow the opportunities that open up before them, or they experiment with different things. And then they get to a point where they say to themselves, okay, I really want to make an intentional choice about what comes next for me. And so they need to take stock of their skills, what they actually want, and really use that as the criteria for how they move on. I don't have any groups to recommend other than I run a group coaching program that's called the Career Strategy Circle. So I bring together a small group of mission-driven leaders who are at that point, and they come together to really figure out their way forward. I always have a few museum professionals in the group. The next one will be happening this fall. But it's so great to find a group like that, because career questions are very lonely. And so you're sitting with these big questions by yourself, and to be in a group of people where you can come to see that that you're in the same boat, that you're asking a lot of the same questions, that actually you're very normal. You're not some big weirdo who is struggling with something completely unique and you've gotten it all wrong. It's really, really helpful to connect with others who are in that same place. So if there isn't a group like that at NEMA, I'm sure that there's opportunity to start one, and I'm sure there would be a lot of people who would be interested in that, especially at this point, because so much is changing about the industry as a result of what's been going on. And so navigating that is going to be a real challenge.
Yep, we actually, a couple weeks ago, we did have a town hall for mid to late career, museum people, but we will be actually having another one in the next couple weeks. We just haven't announced it yet, so that will be on the website probably today or tomorrow and stuff. So we are having something for that midlife or later career, so definitely be on the lookout for NEMA stuff on that one.
Great. Mia put in a question, what if I'm struggling to think of 5 people I would consult? Well, I think it's a good time to be at a webinar thinking about your network and how you want to expand it. I'm going to give you a handout on building your personal board of directors after the session, so you can think about what it would mean to start to populate that group, and start to build who those 5 people would be. You can consciously choose them. So it's okay that that's where you are right now, and hopefully you'll have the tools to start building that as a result of this. There are a couple more things I wanted to say about your board of directors. So a question I often get is when to be transparent and when to be guarded with your network about career changes. Because of course we don't want to signal if we're thinking about a change, or it's all very complicated to navigate. And so that's where I think the board of directors is a great thing, because they can be sort of your inner circle, and you can be more careful about who those people are, and know that they're really trusted people who will keep things confidential. You can ask them outright, can you please keep this confidential between us? So that you have that place to say the things that you're thinking but not sure about, that you don't want to set in stone quite yet. You can also meet with your board of directors separately, you know, have a coffee or have a Zoom call or just a phone call with people on your board. You don't have to call an official board meeting, although I think that's kind of awesome to do that. I actually did do it once. I was at a turning point in my career, and I called together these 5 people who didn't know each other, but they were sort of all separately on my board. And I made them a big pot of chili, and we had a board meeting of sorts. And it was really helpful to help me to find my way and really think through what I wanted to do for myself. And that brings me to say that just because someone advises you to do something doesn't mean you have to do it. So I've fallen into a trap where I've had a hard time making decisions about changes in my life. And so I do something that I call endless polling. So I have the conversation with my colleague, and I talk to my mentor, and I'm talking to my coach about it, and I'm reaching out to people on my board of directors. When I was at a point where I left my full-time work at my nonprofit to start my full-time coaching business, I must have talked to 40 people about that decision. And at the end of 40 conversations, I still hadn't made my decision. And that's because I was just kind of hoping somebody else would make the decision for me. And I realized that I needed to make the decision. And so when you're accessing this network, they're all resources. They all put perspective, experience, data for you to consider on the table, but you are the one who makes the decision. And so, so you need to take all of that into account. Some of it might be contradictory to each other, but you're the one who's going to make the decision and decide, what direction you're going to move on. We're not here to just take all these people's advice and just base our life paths on that. It's not going to be as aligned as if you truly, make the choices yourself. So now that we've talked about who is in your network and how networks work now, let's talk about what to actually do with these people, how to use them. Somebody asked in the Q&A, how do you find these trustworthy people? I have found people to be suspicious and gossipy with their own personal agendas. Yeah, we definitely want to avoid those people. I guess I would ask you, did you feel in your gut that they were trustworthy? Did you kind of not feel like something wasn't right? I think trusting your instincts when it comes to this, is that gut feeling is really important. There are certainly people who I wouldn't talk with about confidential career questions or how to navigate a difficult situation with a coworker. And so developing trust and feeling in a relationship is something that is really key. In networking, it's all about developing relationships, right? And in any relationship, picture a jar of marbles. So this is from Brené Brown. This is how she talks about building trust. And every time that someone holds something confidential or does something to help you, marbles go in the jar. If they're being suspicious and gossipy, marbles come out of the jar. And it's a two-way street. You're putting marbles in the jar or taking marbles out too, depending on, if you show up for somebody when they need something, or if you are really self-serving around them and you don't listen to what they're saying, it's taking marbles out of the jar. And the goal in any relationship is to have a full jar of marbles, to have real trust between you. And so I think that visual can be kind of helpful. So when you're thinking about who could I talk to about this question, who are the people who have full marble jars in your life? Somebody that you feel like they've shown up for you, or they've listened, they've been a good listener. And just picture that visual can help to kind of think through who you would trust to share that information with or to seek guidance from. Lauren asks, how do you reconnect with people from your past who could be good board members, but you have let the relationship slip? We're going to get to that in just a minute. And would you say the board of directors relationship is mutually beneficial, or is it really asking people to invest in you? How do you thank them? We'll get to that in a minute as well. Great questions. Okay, so to engage people in your network, you got to ask them for a meeting or a phone call. So reach out, say, hey, so-and-so said that she thought we should connect. I'm thinking about this certain topic, or I'd love to learn more about how you found your path in your career. You want to make sure that you're being as specific as possible when you ask them for what you want from the conversation. So don't ever say that you want to pick their brain, because nobody wants their brain picked. And also it's very general. And so what you want to do is convince this person that it's going to be a good use of their time and that they can actually be helpful to you. So I was talking with my husband about this last night, and I said, if somebody reached out to him and asked if they could pick his brain about his career path, that would be one thing. If they reached out to him and said, I see that you did the JET program, the Japanese Exchange and Teaching Program, and that you've become a teacher since then, I'd love to talk with you about what your experience was like and how you made that decision. That would be an easy yes for him to spend, half an hour talking with that person. So try to be specific in your ask so that they know that they can actually help you. And before you get together, prepare questions. So know how you're going to use that time. I made a mistake early in my career where I got together with someone who was an important, busy person, and I was really there to pick her brain. I didn't think ahead about what questions I was going to ask her, and I think that she left that meeting feeling like she didn't really help me. And so it probably felt like it wasn't a good use of her time. And so the best thing that you can do is respect someone's time by using it well and help them, make them know that it was helpful to you. So last week I had a call with someone who is an advisor for social entrepreneurs, and she was so generous to give me an hour of her time. And at the end of it, I said, "Thank you so much for your time. I'm really thinking about these 3 things that you said, and my next steps are to do these 2 things." So I really wanted to make sure that I ended the call by showing her that I was really taking things away from the conversation and was going to be using them. So in that meeting, listen, do a lot of listening, asking them questions, and learning from their experience. Teddy says, early in my career in a different field, I met another professional at an event who offered to introduce me to others I wanted to connect to. Turned out he was someone not trusted or liked by many in the field. Any advice on moving beyond an association like that? Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, because if he is using his political capital, which is pretty low, to introduce you, it's not doing much. So yeah, so I guess there is some understanding what that political capital is of the person who's making the introductions. You want to make sure it's a positive association. I just try to avoid that person and look for other ways to make those connections. That's a great way of using LinkedIn, is that if there's somebody that you want to meet, you can search for them, you can see who your mutual connections are, and you can ask someone to make an introduction for you. And that someone else who would have more trust and more political clout in making that introduction. All right, so this is the last key idea, which is that you have to know what you have to offer as well. So I've been talking a lot about what you can gain from these connections, but it's really important also to think about what you offer in these connections. And so somebody asked a question about this. Yeah, Allie was asking, is this mutually beneficial, or is this just asking people to focus on you? I get this question a lot. I feel like I'm bothering people, even when they've offered to chat or to help me. How do I reach out without feeling like I'm a bother? Or I feel like I'm selling myself, and it's an unequal relationship where I feel like I'm receiving more than I'm giving. So I feel guilty. So I want to ask you guys, it's likely that you've been on both sides of the table here. Sometimes you've been a mentor or the person who is being asked to connect with, and sometimes you've been a mentee. So when you've been the person that someone has asked to connect with, whether it's an intern or somebody looking up in their career or wanting to understand your field, what do you get out of those situations? Go ahead and type into the chat box. What do you get out of it when someone comes to you to ask about your experience? Why would you take your time to do that? I like being able to help younger colleagues think through their careers. No one really did that for me when I was starting out. Totally. I'm in a mentoring program at my alma mater, and I always feel like I'm sort of reaching back and helping myself as a young person as I do that. I like to help others and encourage them. Ronit, I'm guessing that makes you feel good when you do that. Helps me clarify my own ideas by explaining them. Totally, Susan. It's helped me to crystallize what some of the key lessons have been in my career path. Importance of giving more help than I received. Knowing I can be a help to help them to understand the journey. Makes me feel like I have something to offer, which is fun and satisfying. Building great colleagues and connections as their careers develop. So Shauna, they've become part of your network. Strengthens the field, says Dan. Happy to help others make the best decision. I like being able to help out, and often the other person has great ideas. It creates a new path in the exchange. Sharing knowledge is better than keeping it to yourself. Build new networks. Makes me more confident in my own experience when others have reached out to me. I remember when I was asked to be a mentor in a program, it was such a milestone for me to be like, really? I could be a mentor? And since then, I've always been a mentor and a mentee at the same time, because I think there's always a way to learn and pass on that growth to others. Creating connections in the field, deepen understanding of current issues that I think might be behind me. Yeah, absolutely. So there's no shortage of things that you guys are coming up with that gives you good feelings for being on that side of the equation. And so let this be a lesson to all of us who are thinking like, I don't want to bother somebody, because it can be a really wonderful opportunity for them to be helpful and to feel like they've done something good and use their time well in the day. So other things that you might have to offer include a unique skill set. You might bring knowledge to the table that can help the person that you're connecting with. You might bring perspective or insight. If you're a younger person and there's an age difference, sometimes that can be true, or you come from a different background, whether it be a different field or a different identity group. I have a mentee who is a senior in college, and she has taught me so much about how she thinks and talks about gender in ways that I just haven't been introduced to before. So it's really helped me in my work. You also have connections to offer or resources. This is something that I'm always doing. So I'll meet with somebody, and then I'll be listening to podcasts, and that topic that we had just been talking about will come up, or even from years ago will come up. And so I'll send them a message and say, hey, I was thinking of you because I heard this episode. It reminded me of our conversation, and I thought you'd enjoy it. You also can offer them sincere gratitude. That is a lovely thing. So these are all things that you can bring to the table. And so it's important to remember that you're not there just begging for somebody's help and mercy and time, and you're just greedily gobbling it all up. I have a mentor who is in her 60s, a nonprofit professional, and she might call me her mentor if you asked her, because when we get together, it's a real exchange of how we're both thinking about navigating our lives, what we're seeing out in the world, and there's a real mutual exchange of information there. So another question had come in about, how do you reach out to people that you haven't been in touch with in a while? And so this is what we think of as warming up the connections, keeping connections warm. Sending resources like a podcast that made you think of them, or an article, or if there's a project going on that you heard about that made you think of them, like, feel free to reach out. If there's something to congratulate them on, sometimes those things come up on LinkedIn, interacting with them on LinkedIn, commenting on their stuff. These are all ways to keep those connections alive. And so you really want to keep connections warm, so that when you draw on them, it's not like, hey, you out of the blue coming here to ask me something big. Yeah, how do you find the time to manage these relationships? Asked Allie. That's a really good question. I don't manage them all at once. It's impossible to do that. And so my strategy is that I try to be really present with whoever I'm with. So I can't keep in touch with everyone all the time, but I think of different people at different points, and I try to reach out to them and really have it be authentic and sincere when I do that. And so I think people will probably remember not the quantity of how much we were connected, but the quality of it. And so thinking about that quality and authenticity in building strong relationships that's my strategy. But if anybody else has any ideas about that, go for it. Type it into the chat. So I know we just have a couple minutes left, but I want to ask if there are questions that have come up. You can type them right into the chat and I'll field them. What are things that are lingering on your mind as we talk about all of this?
And if you wanted to do more of an anonymous one, you could do that through the Q&A because there is the anonymous option there as well.
Great. While you're thinking of questions, I'm just going to tee up what your next steps are. So as I said, I'm going to send you out notes from the session with a couple more articles and resources for you to explore this topic further. I'm going to send you a worksheet that's going to help you to build your board of directors. Oh, and that reminds me, there are two different kinds of members of your board. You know how our boards have regular board members and then honorary board members or like emeritus board members. So I like to think of the regular board members as real people in your life that you can connect with. But I also have fun thinking of who my honorary board members are, like Adam Grant or Michelle Obama. Like, who are the people that I just kind of want to watch and follow and have them be an inspiration that I want to strive for or emulate as I navigate my own life. I want to invite you to join my email list, which is called the Strategic Leaders Toolbox. It's a twice monthly email that I send out with tools and resources on different topics for your career and leadership navigation. I'm putting the link to subscribe in the chat box there. I really try to make these of real value to you. So that's not junk coming in, but something that's going to make you think differently or that you can apply right away. And if you, Erin is giving a shout out to my newsletter. Thanks, Erin. And if you are thinking that now is a good time to really think about where you are in your career, what your next steps are, I offer a single coaching session that's called a career mapping session. I'm booking them through June 19th when I'm going to start a maternity leave. So if you're interested in connecting to think things through together, how you want to use your network, what you want to ask them for, that would be a great thing for us to do together. So you can check out more info about that on my website. I think there's a question that came in. Let's see. How is it best to reach out to someone in your network for a reference, especially if you haven't spoken to them for a while? Well, let's see. This is the kind of thing that I would always Google. It's like, why reinvent the wheel? Somebody has written a lovely template for this. Two of my favorite resources are the Muse and the Balance Careers. And so if you Googled like email template for asking someone for a reference and then the Muse or the Balance Careers, I'm sure you would come up with something that has really good guidance to make it really warm and personal, and making it as easy for them as possible. So telling them, giving them all the information they need about what the reference is for, what are the things that you're hoping they'll highlight. Yes, Erin says, update the person on what you've been up to. Yeah, and so giving them the information that they need to make it easy for them to write that reference. Sometimes you might think that's presumptuous in telling them what to write or how to think about what you've been doing, but it's actually very helpful when you're writing the reference to know what you've been up to, what you're proudest of, what are the things that are most important to the thing that you're applying to, so that we can highlight that in a reference. All right, well, it's 1:01. I'll hang out for a couple more minutes if there are more questions, but I want to thank you all so much for taking the time to join us today. I hope this was really helpful. I hope you have some takeaways of some actionable things that you can put into place. And I hope to see you again, probably virtually at the NEMA conference this year. But I love the NEMA community. So here's my info. Here's how to reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you if you have further questions or anything that you want to talk about related to career and leadership development. I'm your woman. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Carole Ann, and thanks for everybody for attending today. I will be sending out the references that Carole Ann mentioned during the webinar. And as she mentioned, we will be going virtual this year, and our call for proposals is we're actually looking for new additional ones. So that is due June 12th. Make sure to check out the NEMA website for that information. Also upcoming town halls, webinars, and networking events. Do some more networking through NEMA. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
And stuff. So I just want to thank everybody, and thanks, Carole Ann, and congratulations. I didn't know you were going on maternity leave, so
yes,
glad we caught you when we did.
Yes, that's why I'm a little sweaty and out of breath right now.
Can't tell. It's hot out. All right, thanks everybody, and I hope to see you guys all at an upcoming NEMA event. Thanks.